The sudden downfall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in 2024 marks the culmination of nearly 14 years of conflict, a civil war that left hundreds of thousands dead, displaced millions, and involved numerous foreign powers. This is a detailed timeline of the key events leading to Assad's dramatic fall. Protests against Assad erupted in Syria, sparked by the arrest of teenagers in Dara. The protests quickly spread across the country, with demonstrators demanding political reform. The regime's violent crackdown, including mass arrests and shootings, escalated tensions. As peaceful protests gave way to armed resistance, military defections began. This marked the beginning of an armed revolt that attracted support from Western and Arab nations as well as Turkey.The Nusra Front, which is Al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate, launched a bombing in Damascus, marking a significant escalation. The group began to grow in power, crushing nationalist rebel factions. World leaders convened in Geneva and agreed on the necessity of a political transition, but disagreements on the process resulted in stalled peace talks for years. Assad's regime increasingly used airstrikes to target opposition strongholds, leading to mass casualties and escalating the civil war. Meanwhile, Hezbollah, which is the Iran-backed Lebanese militia, supported Assad's forces in securing the town of Qasr, halting the momentum of the rebels. The United States declared chemical weapons use a red line. However, a gas attack in eastern Ghouta near Damascus killed hundreds of civilians but failed to provoke a U.S. military response. The Islamic State, that is the ISIS, seized Raqqa and large areas of Syria and Iraq, significantly altering the dynamics of the conflict. Rebel forces in Homs surrendered, marking their first significant urban defeat. The United States formed an anti-ISIS coalition, launching airstrikes and backing Kurdish forces, which led to tension with Turkey, who opposed Kurdish autonomy.The rebel groups, with support from abroad, made significant territorial gains, capturing Idlib in the northwest. However, Islamist factions began to dominate the opposition. Russia intervened directly, launching airstrikes on behalf of Assad. This marked a turning point in the war, as Russian support helped Assad's forces regain momentum.Alarmed by Kurdish advances, Turkey launched an incursion into northern Syria, establishing a zone of control. The Syrian army, with Russian and Iranian backing, defeated the rebels in Aleppo, which was considered a major victory for Assad's regime. The Nusra Front split from Al-Qaeda, attempting to rebrand itself as a more moderate force, eventually adopting the name Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known as the HTS.Israel acknowledged conducting airstrikes against Hezbollah in Syria, aiming to curb Iran's growing influence. Kurdish-led forces with the U.S. backing captured Raqqa from ISIS. At the same time, the Syrian army drove ISIS out of most of its territory.The Syrian army recaptured eastern Ghouta and other insurgent-held areas in central Syria. The regime's forces pushed south and retook the rebels' last stronghold in Deraa. With major rebel enclaves falling, Assad's regime strengthened its grip on Syria.ISIS lost its last territory in Syria. The United States decided to maintain a military presence in the northeast, particularly to protect the Kurdish allies. Come 2020, the Russian-backed Syrian forces launched a major offensive in Idlib, but a ceasefire was brokered between Turkey and Russia. The front lines froze.Assad controlled most of the Syria, including all major cities. Rebels held the northwest, while the Kurdish-led forces controlled the northeast. The 7th of October Hamas attack on Israel triggered new clashes between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. This diminished Hezbollah's presence in Syria, thus weakening Assad's position. The rebels led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that is the HTS, launched a new offensive on Aleppo. With Assad's allies focused on other fronts, his military quickly collapsed. 8 days after Aleppo fell, HTS forces marched into Damascus. Assad was ousted, marking the collapse of his regime after nearly 14 years of brutal civil war. The rapid fall of Assad's regime at the end of this year comes as a surprise to many and has significant implications for not only Syria but the broader Middle East. With his departure, the country now faces an uncertain future with competing factions and external powers vying for influence.